Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, we still want Raspberry Pi, the $25 Linux PC of cool. Next-gen Wi-Fi will suck less. Intel's 22 nanometers of fear. SSDs aren't dead yet. Fanless PC build when you don't need physics. A great sub-$200 GPU, doubling up power supplies, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 158, recorded February 23rd, 2012. We want Raspberry Pi.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ford, featuring the EcoBoost engine with turbocharger and direct injection. Look for EcoBoost on the 2012 Explorer and Edge, the 2013 Escape, and at Ford.com/technology.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton, joined, as always, by the perky and not quite moved Mr. Ryan Shrout. How's it going, man?
Wow, I've been called many things. Perky's probably not one of them in a while.
It's better than laconic, so. The occasionally taciturn, the cranky. The dear God, don't make me move another thing, Ryan Shrout.
Yeah, I'm actually, we've pretty much moved everything. Now we're at the process of taking everything back out of boxes and crates and stuff, which is really just as painful as putting things in boxes.
Sometimes more
maybe
painful.
More so. Because you want to be more organized this time than you were last time, and at the end, a couple hours into it, you're like, screw it, you just put stuff on shelves anyway.
I carried this over from the other building. Why did I carry this over from the other building?
Yeah,
that's my favorite
exactly. Or you walk around days like, hey, where's that gaff tape? It was in a box. Oh, that helps. That's going to work out well later.
There's 143 boxes. I'm going to make you look through each and every one just for saying.
The bright side is I am doing the show through that 500-foot network cable successfully. Now, I am being broadcast to you courtesy of that 500-foot Ethernet cable outside running through the grass. And so obviously they haven't started cutting the lawns here yet. So that's a plus.
It's probably a good moment for us to join off or 3, 2. It's probably a good point for us to jump off and explain that Twitch is This Week in Computer Hardware. We talk about hardware, occasionally software, once in a while operating systems, and certainly the occasional tablet, but mostly we are about computer hardware. Ryan, I should say PCPer.com, a.k.a. Ryan's all-consuming job, is in the process of moving to a new office, a new location, and you have a temporary Ethernet wire strung outside. And yes, I would like to answer someone who emailed me about this. It can be terribly dangerous to string Ethernet outside, especially during a thunderstorm. That said, for short periods of time, if you get lucky and you if you properly isolate and ground.
Yeah, I totally did that.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying you wouldn't, but I'm explaining to people like, you get the really cool surge protectors with the Ethernet pass-throughs on them. And,
Gotcha.
The trick is for it to be a temporary run outside and not a permanent run. But it was really funny. Like, is Ryan going to be okay? It's very dangerous to string Ethernet outside. I'm like, I think he's got it. So 500-foot run. How's the speed been?
Pretty good. It connects at 100 megabits speed. It won't connect at gigabit. It won't communicate at that. But, our internet connection at the other office was 20 down and 2 up, and we get that full 20 down, 2 up, 500 feet away. So at the very least, we were hitting the 100 megabits, data cap over there. I guess we could transfer some stuff. We still got a Drobo over there that we can communicate with. If we wanted to move some stuff and really kind of benchmark it and see what we get. But it works. It is temporary, as you are saying. It's temporary until our fiber gets installed next month. And we didn't want to sign those lengthy 1 year, $200 and something a month contracts for temporary internet service. So we'll get by. But it was interesting because I think we talked about it last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, about the idea of using long-range directional Wi-Fi for the same purpose. And because of my fear of maybe lightning storms or lawnmowers. I was going to have you send me some of your gadgets for that purpose, but you were telling us before the show, it's not the wattage that's interesting, it's the sensitivity of these Wi-Fi radios.
If you start looking at, I have to find the link for it. There's a really good wireless company actually up in Northern California when I say wireless, I mean wireless Wi-Fi. And one of the things you discover as you start experimenting with this stuff is the thing that's going to impact the distance you can comfortably transmit. And in 500 yards, it's actually super easy. A mile is actually pretty easy. But the receiver sensitivity is the thing that's going to impact your ability to communicate over Wi-Fi over long distances. That's the biggest one. Distantly followed, it's like receiver sensitivity, antenna strength, and then distantly followed by the wattage or the transmission power coming off your transmitter. Because you can blast this amazing signal, but if you can't actually receive it at the other end, you just don't have no packets going back and forth. But I will find, I've got some directional, pretty narrow, they are line of sight. If you can't get them line of sight, they're not going to work. These paddle antennas that are like 14 dB of attenuation, which means instead of like 0 dB of attenuation, basically ideally like you have a point source and the wireless, the radio waves, right, that make up Wi-Fi would radiate equally in all directions. And as you increase the attenuation, you first you squash the donut, kind of create a torus, and then it gets super directional, create a directional device. That's when you usually get into double digits. You're usually talking about an actual, kind of straight line, or actually in reality, cone going in between the two. But I will dig into my box of doom as soon as I unbury it, because I just moved cubicles. So there's literally like 5 antennas, several USB devices, and who knows what all else buried in my somewhere in the storage room right now. Just out of curiosity, how far is it from your network connection or your computer to like a window or a space where you can get out?
Pretty close. It's pretty close. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing is 20. The cable itself. You need the the cable you need to keep from losing all of your signal. You can't use regular coax. You need basically like high-end cable, and that's the stuff that really kills you because it costs like $1 or $2 a foot.
Oh, okay.
But hopefully I have enough of that to reach where you need to go.
Sweet.
Go ahead.
I just said sweet. That'd be awesome. Like to try it out.
Twitch at twit.tv is the email address you want to ask us questions. We're going to answer those later on in the show. Right now, we're going to talk about the hardware news of the week. Chris Tyler shows off Fedora Remix OS for ARM-powered Raspberry Pi computer. That's up at PCPro.com. I'm really, 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 really getting excited about the Raspberry Pi device. $25 without networking, $35 with. It's really cool. It's essentially a card-based standalone Linux or PC that can run Linux. And this is pretty interesting because they got Seneca College is tweaking Fedora, creating a distro Fedora to work on the ARM platform that Raspberry Pi is distributing. It should be raspberrypi.org.
Yeah,
I want to make sure I got that name right before I tell everybody. Raspberry Pi. And a lot of people have been asking, like, why can't I buy one now? It's because they haven't arrived yet. They've been built. I believe they're shipping, and as soon as they are available, they will put them up for sale on raspberrypi.com. I believe is the Raspberry Pi store. So sign up, get your email notification, and I'm sure these are going to sign out in like 8 minutes, or I should say sell out in like 8 minutes when they finally become available.
Yeah, I would buy quite a few of them if those prices are accurate, and I'll sell them out if nothing else, right? I mean, I could seriously see buying like 10 of these, and we're like, I'll figure something out, right? Sure, why not?
It's
as long as we can get a usable OS like Fedora on there. There are tons of options to play with it, even if you can't get a hold of the Windows 8 on ARM infrastructure, as Microsoft is claiming.
Well, if you look at raspberrypi.org/FAQs or FAQS, it's pretty cool, right? Because there's the idea is that there's 2 versions of the board: USB 2.0, HDMI output, micro USB for power and SD card slots, and then Broadcom ARM 11 700 MHz chip, either with 128 or 256 megabytes of RAM. But you can get an Ethernet jack on the B model, and it's basically, it is like, should be capable of doing 1080p video, HDMI, as this really cool dedicated like XPMC or other distributed or open source media devices. I don't know. I'm excited, man. But
I think it'll be interesting.
Batch, for the first batch, they're limiting orders to one per person. This restriction will be relaxed. Well, the trick is to have everyone at PCPer.com order one. But the idea is like they want to prevent eBay scalping of the devices as they show up.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, being on the other end of that many times. So, like, I've been trying to get a hold of a Nest thermostat for a long time, and they've never been able to come in stock. But you can find them on eBay marked up by about 2x. Well, so that's awesome.
Buy early, buy often. Speaking of often, awesome, or often. I was reading this article, like at the press release of this morning. VIA has created a quad-core mini ITX board. How powerful is this going to be?
So it's a mini ITX board. The EPA M900 and M910 both feature a 1.2 gigahertz quad-core E-series processor. They say offering, quote, enhanced multitasking and superb multimedia performance at the lowest quad-core power budget for next-generation embedded products, and that's kind of the key. What's interesting here is you're getting a quad-core processor at a 27.5 watt TDP. That's the maximum power. The graphical portion of that is powered by the VIA VX900, which that's actually the chipset there. It doesn't mention what graphics controller they are using in here, does it? I mean, it's going to be pretty reasonable, and my guess is going to be kind of maybe a little bit lower performance than the Sandy Bridge integrated processor graphics, but reasonable for video playback. Don't expect to play games on this. This is obviously not what it's intended to do. But if you wanted a small form factor machine that would be able to do some of these multitasking things, you'll definitely be able to do that. They also have a dual core variant. It's going to come out as high as 1.6 gigahertz, which, again, these are embedded parts. They're not swappable. There's no socket. There's nothing like that. You plug it in, you go. They use SODIMM memory. They have a PCI Express and a PCI slot, depending on your specific use case needs. But it's I would love to know internally at VIA, like, how much traction these types of parts get. Because it's a company that most of us have written off in terms of being relevant in the hardware space. Now, I say that, and I say that as more of an enthusiast person. Yeah, but you know, you look at like emerging markets, China, India specifically, they have had great success there, and those are the markets that really covet these types of devices. You know, something that's going to run low power. They don't have the electrical infrastructure that you might have where you live here in the U.S. or in Canada or wherever, and you still get enough performance and multimedia capability to really bring things like the internet and this type of connectivity everywhere in the world. And that's the niche that VIA as a company has really, even in the last 5 to 10 years, has really kind of focused on, is those markets. And I think this will continue them down that route as long as they continue to offer prices lower than what the competition, namely AMD, or I'm sorry, Intel or AMD for that matter, will offer. And before, you know, the most basic operating systems will run on ARM, right? Until Fedora on ARM comes out and is widely available, or Windows on ARM for that matter, and that kind of stuff. So it's a good product to see.
Cool. Interesting story. You just mentioned Intel a second ago. Intel, ARM, obviously competitors to VIA. Intel, oddly enough, has decided to become a 22 nanometer foundry for other people. So if you're not entirely familiar with chip production, there's a lot of what they call, like, you know, fabless chip companies where they design chips and then they send the chip design to somebody else to build them. And it's interesting. It is news like this which leads to apocalypse theories. Intel has announced they will become a foundry for customers looking to manufacture chips using Intel's pretty delete expletive advanced, not from the article from me, 22-nanometer process with Tri-Gate transistors, also pretty delete expletive advanced. Current competitors in this industry include TSMC, UMC, IBM, Samsung, and global foundries, each with varying degrees of commitment. Interesting. They have that much excess capacity, or are they worried about the future of the business? I mean, it's just an odd choice.
It's an odd choice, and on the PC Perspective podcast that we recorded last night, there was, Josh and I kind of differed on how important this specific announcement was. He saw it more as they're going to be willing to build parts that they have no stake in or desire to compete in, FPGAs, for example, that type of thing. What's I think is very compelling about this decision and the theoretical idea of Intel really sourcing all kinds of chips is that they are far and away the process technology leader compared to any other company out there. And until recently, they have kept that advantage completely to themselves. And what I think maybe might be bringing this about is the fact that AMD is not really a competitor in the high-end market anymore. And these process technologies they used to use strictly for how fast can we get the clock speed, how high performance can we get, they don't have to worry about that anymore. They don't have to worry about, the competition from AMD. AMD doesn't even have their own foundry anymore. They go through global foundries and TSMC. So it's possible that Intel feels less threatened than they used to in that market and in that market. So they may be more open to this type of stuff. If I don't believe they have like a big excess of capacity that they're looking to fill, and it's obvious that they don't need to make more money. Although no company is going to pass up the option if given it.
Right.
So I think it will completely depend on what type of customers they're willing to adopt with this in the coming months to 24 months. If they take on somebody that you can't imagine Intel trying to get into this mobile space, that they're somehow going to give their 22-nanometer process technology to people like Qualcomm, right? It's just not going to happen. That's who they want to become. That's who they want to dominate now. So
is
those
it
are the guys. What's that?
Is it opening an avenue that just in case they can't become the replacement for ARM processors, that they can build ARM processors, or do you know what I mean? Develop that relationship for other people.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's a good option. It could be a kind of a fallback plan, but I think that's a very distant fallback plan. I don't think that that they're kind of planning for that. I think maybe it would be like a worst case scenario. But I mean, they are counting on their 22-nanometer process to help them escalate into this market, right? To actually become competitive in this market. It's their key differentiating factor. x86 is actually a hindrance to them getting into this market. The benefit will be what can they do with power, and efficiency and that type of stuff using these process technologies.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just so funny. Like you think of Intel competing in the market right now, and all I can hear is Conan going to crush my enemies, drive them before me, to hear the lamentation of their women, because it's just Intel's just crushing people. And when I say people, I primarily mean AMD, because it's all that's left in terms of the consumer desktop notebook. I shouldn't say that they're the only thing left. They're the only non-ARM platform left. It's kind of interesting because I was laughing. Nvidia has officially branded Tegra 3's 5-core quad-core architecture as 4+1.
Yep.
Okay, that's nice. That's pretty much all we probably say about that.
This tells you this really enunciates, this really makes prominent the difference between what Nvidia is trying to do in the ARM space versus what Qualcomm and TI and all these other companies have done for years and years and years. Right. They've never had a desire to market to a consumer. They've never had a desire to put their make their part of the phone the primary feature, to make it a logo that you look for on a box or a logo that you look for on a handset at Verizon or AT&T. Right. Nvidia works in a completely different fashion. That they grew up as a company as marketing can drive so much of their sales and business, and they are taking that to the SoC, Tegra, cell phone, tablet market in a way that nobody has seen before. And what I think, this 4+1 idea of, now they're rebranding what they used to call VSMP, variable SMP, which is their fifth core, their kind of companion core. I know we talked about it at least several months ago. Right. But the 4+1, they are hoping that becomes a tagline. That you'll hear it in commercials, that you'll see it on signs at the stores. And I'm very curious to see how competitors like Samsung and Qualcomm and TI respond to that. Are they going to become more consumer-facing? Are they going to want to create these brands to create these types of things? Are we going to, I have very good stuff. We get emails about it. We get notifications, that kind of stuff. They posted it on their blog. They're very kind of public about it because they know they're the small guy and they're trying to build up into the bigger guy. Are the bigger guys going to say, okay, we need to start doing this too? That's what I think will be most interesting about these types of results. Not in 4+1. It's kind of gimmicky and odd sounding if you ask me personally, but I know what their goal is there. VSMP, as a technical person, I thought was intuitive, made sense, and stood for actual things. 4+1, especially because it's the number 4, the word plus, and the number 1 just feels odd.
Perhaps this is an indication of why you do what you do and you don't do, say, pure marketing for a living.
Yes, that is very true.
I know the feeling when you're sitting there like, Centrino's stupid, but you hear people, it's like, I'd like a notebook with the Centrino technology. There is no Centrino technology. Centrino is a marketing platform. And they look at you like you're on crack.
There's a reason they get paid.
Speaking of getting paid and being on crack, I was reading it up on VentureBeat.com. Qualcomm Atheros expects a smoother rollout for next-generation Wi-Fi. When you're talking to the press about how smooth the next generation of Wi-Fi is going to be, and like the second graph on the story is the new 802.11 AC wireless technology dubbed 5G Wi-Fi by rival Broadcom.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Can it really be any worse than 802.11n?
Gosh, I hope not.
I mean, that was awful, and it lasted like a decade.
Forever. It took to it's kind of funny. It's for some reason like modems and Wi-Fi have been the hell of competing standards. Basically, because huge huge networking companies or back in the day. I just remember like 56K modems, like that was like the longest. It was just a nightmare. It's just like 802.11n, but it's an interesting idea. Hopefully, where is it? Qualcomm president of Internet Services Rob Chanhawk, 802.11 AC technology would likely see a simultaneous rollout for both access point chips as well as end-use devices. Expected to debut late this year, early next year. Depending on when the engineering standard is finalized by an industry consortium, quote, this time there has been less squabbling around the standard among industry players. So the idea is that they realized how badly they screwed up the market last time around, and they're going to try to not screw it up this time. I wait with bated breath. I'm not the hugest fan of 5 gigahertz for Wi-Fi, possibly because I live in a house with a lot of stone in the walls. When I say stone, I mean plaster and lath. So we will see how the performance is. We will see when it ships, which will hopefully be later this year. Not so late this year. Corsair's actually Corsair's got a new power supply family. What makes them so, quote, enthusiastic, Ryan?
Corsair is a company, when they entered the power supply market, they did it fairly recently, and they went at it very aggressively, and they quickly became one of the top choices for system. I don't want to say system builders, but for individuals that are system builders, DIY guys. And they did it by simply they made great power supplies. They were high quality, they were efficient, and we switched over to Corsair 1200 watt power supplies on our GPU test beds because we had been using something else that was significantly louder. And the Corsairs, they listen to a lot of feedback, and they offer both modular and non-modular versions of the power supplies, and they continue to iterate. Now, the differences in power supplies, in 2010 and 2011 were fairly insignificant. There wasn't a lot of change that happened in terms of the technology and stability and that kind of stuff. But they're still iterating. They're still releasing newer versions, which is good. I think this was a review over at Hard OCP where they looked at the TX550M, the TX570M, which the M stands for modular. So these are, I don't want to say fully modular. The term fully modular usually refers to you can like disconnect the primary ATX cable and that kind of stuff, which seems kind of pointless to me because why would you ever have a power supply and not need the primary ATX connector and that kind of stuff? But there you go. And it apparently passed with flying colors, did very well, according to the Hard OCP review. And it's, people tend to skimp on power supplies, and we tell people not to. It's
do it.
It is, yeah. It's like everything else in this is the one device, maybe besides your motherboard, where everything is connected to it. And maybe more importantly, a lot of amperage and electricity flows through it to all of the devices in your system. So you don't want something that maybe you don't have as much confidence in as you might think. So Corsair definitely makes great units for that.
One device in your computer can simultaneously take out every single other, causing you to buy all new hardware and a new power supply to replace the cheap-ass one you shouldn't have bought in the first place.
Be nice to your power
Yes. Buy a good one once. You'll thank us later. Weird. This is just peculiar to me. Sapphire, of all people, building a Nettop PC. Basically an AMD-powered E450 AMD processor. I keep thinking this would be a really cool, home server, like foundation for a home server or media server. And potentially, yes, even desktop, as long as you don't want to game. But it's like $400. Is this Sapphire's first Nettop?
No. They actually had built ones based on the Atom processor that I wasn't super fond of. They were just like everything else. But they were one of the first ones to release one based on the AMD E350 APU, which was AMD's first Brazos-based APU. And it's actually really nice devices. They're well built. They're pretty stylish looking. In terms of the hardware itself, there's not a whole lot of variance in terms of what you get in these different machines. You can see in the photo there, they come with a nice stand. They come with accessories for HDMI and DVI and all that kind of stuff. They would make great kind of home servers. They make great home theater PCs as long as you don't want to do the gaming, as you mentioned. One of the things that I look for these devices to do is, do they come with like a VESA mount to attach to the back of a TV or something like that, and then you have an IR blaster kind of remote. So here's a computer that not only does it not take up any shelf space, but it's completely hidden from view, and they're low power enough and quiet enough that that's not an issue. And the Sapphire machines actually do a really good job of that. We have an E351 here that we're going to utilize as just basically powering a TV with some monitoring software on it full time. So they're perfect for that, but they can do a lot more. If you need a thin and light client, they're great machines at $400 or lower, according to the story there at the Inquirer.
Huh. Interesting concept. Not too long ago, the Bleak. I'll just read the title. If you haven't seen it, it's a paper basically suggesting the bleak future of NAND flash memory, and the idea is that University of California, Microsoft Research got together to take a strong look at what happens as the density increases on NAND memory and therefore SSDs. There's a networkcomputing.com had a pretty good summary. Howard Marks basically as he puts it, the gist of the paper's argument is that the physics of flash and the researchers' testing indicate that as flash density increases, the life and performance of flash will degrade to the point that by 2024, flash will no longer be a viable solution. And when we say viable solution, we mean a reasonable alternative to rotating media, right? Because right now we're all very excited while we're watching the density increase. We're waiting with bated breath for parity to be achieved between the the cost of rotating media and the cost of similarly sized SSDs. ... Without the price of rotating media, going through the ceiling because of apocalyptic disasters in manufacturing facilities, but because SSD prices are getting cheaper. And Alan over at PC Per basically, quote, has reservations about the methods upon which the paper is based, which is a polite way of saying, I'm not putting any words in Alan's mouth, but I think he thinks the speculation, basically the methodology they use to come up with their thesis that SSD is screwed is bunk, and the paper kicks off by declaring steep increases in latency and drops in lifetime associated with increases in bits per cell. While this is true, flash memory manufacturers are not making large pushes to increase bits per cell beyond the standard MLC 2 bits per cell tech. And it's a really interesting read. We could spend a long time. This one, I'd love to have Alan here. Yeah. Because Alan probably just
he talked about it a lot on the podcast last night, actually. And I don't claim to be an expert on the claims they're making here, but the kind of the general overview takeaway from the paper and then Alan's response to it is that it seems like a very one-sided argument. And they make some interesting points, but they everybody said this about hard drives
right
not too long ago. Everybody says this about Moore's Law and process technology in general. And they never even discuss the possibilities that these things could be.
Well, it's a college professor or people in a university with plus experts from a software company. And I don't want to talk about Slack. I don't want to be mean to the professors or mean to anybody at Microsoft, but I don't go to Microsoft for advances in memory technology. And Alan's like, the point I want all of you to take home is that just as with CPU, RAM, or any other industry involving wafers and dies, the manufacturers will adapt and overcome to the hurdles they meet. Nobody would have thought. I mean, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd say Moore's Law is going to hit a brick wall. And about 5 years ago, I thought, you know what? The smartest people on the planet all seem to be working for hardware companies, figuring out ways to keep that going. And the areal density on hard drives keeps going up. So I have faith that the kind of intensity that has been focused on CPUs and hard drives is going to be focused on memory, and that we will find exciting new ways to increase that. Either that or we'll end up having
people much smarter than you and I are. You can't say that they're going to figure it all out, but they're definitely going to do some impressive things. We've talked about several in the last couple of weeks about using different kind of lasers to get to 10 nanometer subatomic level switching and that kind of stuff. I mean, to just blanket say that Flash is going to be dead by 2024, it's just like it almost seems like a cop out to something, And we didn't necessarily accuse them of having some kind of ulterior motive to it, but it's like if somebody had told me next week, well, Seagate actually funded this paper, I would be like, not a surprise, right? It wouldn't shock me.
Well, I think it's Microsoft research. University of Computer Science and Engineering, UC San Diego. I think when you're teaching and this may be reflective of my own college experience, but I think when you're teaching, you tend not to encourage people to believe that, and then Deus Ex Machina, a mechanism will drop from the skies and rescue you from hell. But the reality is that the reason we have patent laws to encourage smart people to come up with the Deus Ex Machina to come down and make these advances in technology. So I think Alan's got it right. They sort of ignored the fact that people come up with brilliant ideas that change the way we approach problems, and that keeps the technology advancing.
What do you say we take a break here?
You don't want to talk about Coke Freestyle?
I do. Maybe we should save it. We're running a little long, but I'm disappointed because actually I did get a call back from Coca-Cola about getting a machine and talking about the monthly required syrup purchase for a Freestyle machine.
Well, let's take a moment to thank someone much closer to our hearts than Coca-Cola or their Freestyle machine, the fine men and women of Ford and the exciting...
Right.
Actually, well, let's talk. Well, you know what? I'll let you talk about it. It's good stuff.
That's all right. What we're going to talk about today, Patrick, is EcoBoost. Ford EcoBoost. It is the engine technology from Ford that delivers the power of a larger engine and a smaller one, which is obviously great for efficiency. That's their goal here. EcoBoost engine technology helped make the 7-passenger Ford Explorer best-in-class highway fuel economy. And here's how they did it. And I, as somebody who drives a big truck, I can really appreciate this this advantage. Ford redesigned the conventional engine to meet fuel efficiency standards. They created EcoBoost technology by reducing the number of cylinders to improve efficiency and compensating for the loss in horsepower and torque through a combination of technologies, including direct injection and turbocharging. Now, if you're not exactly sure how that works, and I was not either, EcoBoost combines the direct injection, which is produces a cooler, denser charge that generates more power per drop of fuel, while the two small engine-cooled turbochargers spool up more quickly than a single large turbo. Energy from the engine's exhaust, which would otherwise be wasted. Interesting. Energy that from engine's exhaust, which would otherwise be wasted, rotates the turbine wheels. Each turbine is coupled to a compressor that pressurizes incoming air, significantly increasing output per liter, which directly relates into your efficiency of your engine. You experience instantaneous low-end torque responsiveness with virtually no turbo lag. You can look for the 2.0-liter EcoBoost engine on the 2012 Explorer and Edge. The 2013 Escape, coming just this spring, actually, will offer a 1.6-liter and 2.0-liter EcoBoost option. You can learn more about this and other technologies Ford is bringing to its vehicles at Ford.com/technology. It's interesting to see a little change there. You know, we're not necessarily talking about hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles, but instead how their engineers were able to improve the efficiency of a standard gasoline engine through EcoBoost.
Well, I think it's interesting. I had a chance to talk with Mr. Mullally, the CEO of Ford at CES, which was a pretty incredible experience. But one of the things he pointed out is you know, we don't they don't make a specific hybrid car or a specific diesel car or a specific gas car or a specific EcoBoost car. They make the best delete expletive car they can. My word. I don't think the man curses. And then they let the consumer choose what kind of engine they want. You know, do they want, you know, a turbocharged engine? Do they want a naturally aspirated engine? Do they want a hybrid engine? Do they want an electric power plant? And all of this incredible array of options inside the vehicles, which I thought was a really interesting idea. The idea that, you know, we're going to build great cars, we'll let the consumer pick what the power plant is inside of them. The EcoBoost engines are sweet, though. They are very, very
and
sweet.
Again, the go to Ford.com/technology if you want more information on that and all of the cool stuff that Ford is bringing to their vehicles. So, I'm going to jump into some emails. Did we tell people how to get a hold of us? Did we do that at the beginning of the show? I can't remember.
Twitch. This week in computer hardware, not it's TWICH, not TWITCH, which is the way I tend to say it with my strange amalgamation of accents. Had a quick chat room question. Fushigi said, what is a wafer then? And I highly recommend you check out an article at bit-tech.net, which is how to make a CPU from sand to shelf, which is basically you purify silicon, you create a silicon ingot, which is kind of a giant tube of silicon, and you slice off wafers. They're pretty crazy, about 12 inches in diameter now, apparently. The wafers are then polished to a flawless mirror finish, ready for the next stage of the process. And apparently they actually pre-cut, they buy, apparently Intel or other companies buy their wafers from other people.
You think they use a saw blade like that? Because that would be hilarious.
That would be really, really awesome.
Just a guy in the woods cutting silicon wafers.
It's so funny. So but basically they etch the wafer. The wafer is covered in strategically patterned layers of photoresist, which acts like a stencil for when the wafer is bombarded with high-powered beams of charged atoms called ions. It's an interesting discussion.
It is.
But basically, the chips are etched. That would be the shortest version of it. But the wafers are the silicon that are the foundation of chip technology. It's beyond cool. I highly recommend you. If you don't know what you're looking at when you're looking at a chip, just read it. It's awesome. It's fun.
I've been lucky enough to go to a foundry. I went to one of Global foundries in Dresden, and the process is impressive. Yeah. And I actually thought the automation was just as impressive as the actual technology involved in it as well. Because the problem is these diagrams on the BitTech or the BitTech article are actually really, really good. Because when you're there in person, all you see is a machine.
A big giant
wafer
steel
goes in,
box.
It comes out. It's like, well, something happened inside of it, right? I guess. I assume. But
it looks kind of different.
Yes, Tinkerboy, I did get to wear a bunny suit. I didn't get to. I had to.
It's not an option. And the sticky shoes, the sticky thing you walk in before you. It's. Dave's got we answered questions here on Twitch this week, Computer Hardware, Twitch at twit.tv. Email from Dave who says, I enjoy tuning into Twitch just to see what's new in PC hardware. I'm not a gamer or anything, but I build all my own PCs and a few for other people. One friend of mine that I built a few machines for is a CPA, and her mother also runs a service that does tax preparation. Always good friends to have. A few minutes ago, I got a call that one of the computers is having a problem and shutting down. From what I've been told, the fan had been getting noisy, and now it's suddenly quiet, so we know that most likely it quit running and the box is just overheating. Or you just have less airflow in the box. This has been a problem in this application in the past because the computers tend to get run 24/7 for most of the year. And being in an office with people coming and going all day long, they tend to pick up quite a bit of dirt, fuzz, etc., which messes with the fans. You need to look at the new cases with the fan filters on them. I was wondering what might be a good solution to use for building a machine that's either totally fanless or that only has a fan on the power supply. The computer only needs to be powerful enough to run some basic tax preparation software, spreadsheets, and Windows XP or 7 with a reasonable amount of smoke. I was thinking of some sort of Atom or Brazos processor, but do they make anything that uses the regular old ATX form factor? I have to say, I am a little uptight. Brazos I'm good with. Atom I'm not so good with. I don't want anybody running Atom right now.
There are way better alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of funny. You can actually quite happily, put a Core i3, Core i5 processor inside a box. I'd lean towards Core i3 in this situation to save money with a passive cooler. Use the graphics on the CPU, a passive cooler, and the most of the power supplies these days are super quiet. The trick really is to get a case that is relatively well sealed, directs the airflow, and puts the little removable slide out. If you have a lot of cat fur or whatever strange dust is getting inside the system. You laugh, right? I still have nightmares.
I have dog, but yes, I know the same problem.
Where you open up somebody's case and there's a dust bunny inside of it, and when I say dust bunny, I really mean like Dust Totoro or Dust freaking monster, because you're like, wow, you could knit a cat from all the fur inside this computer. This is so wrong. But the part of the issue is that there may not be dust, or if you don't see a lot of dust inside the machine, it may just be that the fans weren't of the highest quality and basically wore out, which they can do over time. You had a couple interesting links up here. Zotac Fusion EMD or AMD E350, $150 for a super compact board, and a Seasonic X series. You're comfortable with fanless power supplies, right? I
am when you're using them in low power environments. So like this one it's a 400 watt, right? Which could actually power like a Core i3 and a decent discrete graphics card and that kind of stuff. And is it's definitely more than you need for running an AMD E350, but it's also going to be a good high quality result. Lee has tested this for us Hard OCP has tested this, and we both came away impressed from the devices. So I trust the power supply a little bit more. You pay more for these fanless ones because they use higher quality components, so it's not going to be like the cheapest unit you can build. But the Zotac Fusion motherboard, CPU, GPU, all that combo is also passive. So you're eliminating a lot of noise right there. Now, what you should do for sure is have good quality airflow through your system. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be high airflow. High airflow creates noise, but you can have a larger, get a mini ITX or mini ITX case that has a larger fan on the front. You get a higher quality one that's going to be able to rotate slower, but still create some airflow. It can't be completely fan-free, even with this hardware. I wouldn't trust it for very long with that, especially if you have, dust buildup and that kind of stuff. I just recently replaced a file storage system for a group of lawyers that is at the other end of this 500-foot cable. That they had dust in there, and it had clogged up the one side of the heatsink, and the fan stopped working, and the CPU and or motherboard were fried because of it. So you definitely don't want to do that. But especially on these small motherboards, you tend to get small fans, which tend to rotate at high speeds, which tend to be kind of that high-pitched, loud, annoying sound that you might hear out of a computer. So if you can get rid of that and replace it with a larger, slower spinning fan that can move enough air to keep it cool, then you'll be better off.
There you have it. Interesting question from sorry, I was looking for a particular part that I can't remember the name of. Tyler's got a question about slaving a power supply. He says, I have a crazy project. I'm building a file server PVR box at home. I thought of an Elysium full tower ATX computer case and noticed that I can install 2 power supplies in this case. My first question is, do they make a power supply that will slave on another? To say when the power supply that is plugged into the motherboard powers on, it will power the second supply also. Which sounds like a pun or a riddle. A limerick, a thing that you say that's hard to say. This would be useful since I'm planning to fill the entire front of the case with hard disks. Secondly, I'm also thinking of using an Asus E35M1-M Pro Fusion AMD E350 APU motherboard. It's the E350 show today. It will be running either OpenSUSE or Ubuntu and Myth TV as the PVR software. Do you think the motherboard will be up to re-encoding my TV shows, or will it kill it with all the work? I don't think you kill it. I just think there are faster alternatives.
Sure.
Re-encoding the slow. You don't really kill. The only way to kill a processor these days is basically to beat the CPU with a stick or to overvolt it in a really egregiously hideous fashion, like with lightning. But CPUs are really hard to kill these days. You may overwhelm it to the point that it's no fun to use anymore, but that's an entirely different project. We had a really interesting discussion on this a long time ago. And there are actual products people sell that allow you to connect multiple power supplies, control multiple power supplies, literally just for problems like this. And I cannot find the link to that, gosh darn it.
So there are a couple. I'm trying to see. I see the picture of them. Lee dual power supply adapter is one. Right. If you Google that, I think that is what it is, and it's basically a cable that goes between the ATX power connector and on your motherboard and the cable from your power supply, but it has another cable that just has one wire on it that goes into the second power supply, which is basically the turn on, turn off kind of indicator. It's at frozencpu.com. But if you just Google Lee, Lianli, dual power supply adapter, you'll find it. It's $15, and yeah, that will do exactly what you need. My question is, Patrick, he's using an Asus E35M motherboard to power this. Right. Why do you need 2 power supplies for that?
Well, actually, he probably doesn't. The $64,000 question is how many power. So I think Tyler's concern is he's going to have so many hard drives in this box that he's going to need a second power supply to power them. And my first thought is, like, I doubt it.
Yeah, I really doubt it.
My second thought is, I doubt it. My third thought is, if you have that many hard drives in the box, you probably should convert this into a server box that hides it. It just, 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, if I was building like a 1 terabyte machine and it was going to take 10 hard drives to do it, and you were, you didn't want to jump Molex connectors, or, at some point you could actually have enough hard drives that you could not spin up all of the hard, because basically it would spin up all of the hard drives in the process of booting the machine, and you could actually have enough hard drives pulling voltage off the power supply that would keep the motherboard from booting. Things are different these days, and the power management's much better, and the power supplies are much bigger. So I don't really, can you do this? Yes. Can you do this safely? Absolutely. Especially you have a case that's designed for 2 power supplies. You're not going to be doing something really you're going to need 2 plugs, one for each power supply. You're not doing any weird hacking inside the machine. I don't think you need a second power supply. But if you find, I would rather you bought one, 80 plus gold, silver, whatever power supply that was like 500 watts, 600 watts than buy 2 200-watt power supplies. Just because get a larger, more efficient power supply, and take a look at the wattage requirements or the amperage requirements for the hard drive, and I think you'll find out they're much smaller than you think they are. I
do thank him for alerting me to that case, though, because we might have use for that here. A case that has 2 power supplies, has 12 5.25-inch bays that you could then use 5 and 3 hard drive racks.
I could make even
put a lot of hard drives in a file server. And hey, you could use 2 power supplies. And now I know the name of the adapter from Leanne Lee to get that to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it.
How about an email from Hayden about Crossfire and the eternal PCI Express width issue? It says he recently had a fault with both his Radeon 5970 and OCZ Revo drive, 120 gig, and I sent them off for warranty return. As both products were out of production, the manufacturers forwarded credit to the retailer I purchased them from, which is actually pretty cool. Gave me some spending money. Since I have recently purchased a 7970 as a replacement for the video card that died, I was wondering if my motherboard, a Gigabyte X58 UD7, would be able to take full advantage of Crossfire performance if both cards ran at PCI Express by 8. He has a PERC 5i RAID card using another by 8 of the remaining by 16 slot, which would mean all slots would be reduced to by 8. I've heard that they can take a 10% performance hit running at this bandwidth, and the loss can be compounded by cross-firing them. So first thing I'll say is the performance hit on a single GPU from running by 8 versus by 16 has got to be about as close to 0% as you can imagine, maybe 1%. And honestly, even in Crossfire, the difference going from 2 by 16s to 2 by 8s is probably, again, within a margin of error, 1 to 3%. It's pretty minimal. Now, what does interest me is he mentioned the OCZ Revo drive, which is a PCI Express based SSD, and then he mentioned this PERC RAID card, which is also a PCI Express by 8 device. So he's got potentially 4 devices running PCI Express by 8 in his system, all of which could potentially be pretty high bandwidth, and that's actually I'd say that's not common for even enthusiast users. So if anybody would be on the lookout for PCI Express 3 capability, or like the X79 platform in Sandy Bridge Z that has 40 lanes of PCI Express, he would be the one. But I don't 10% is way higher than you're going to see, except for maybe some very specific use cases. I don't think that's an issue. We run by 16, we run by 8 SLI and Crossfire configurations all the time, and I'm very confident in their proximity to absolute perfection in terms of performance. Otherwise, we wouldn't be, reporting the numbers. So, X58 UD7 still a great board. I think you're still going to get the performance you need out of there. And God love you for having a pair of 7970s soon. There's not a lot of people that can say that.
Not at all. One last question before we go, coming in from Zach. Hello, Ryan and Patrick. I love the show. Glad you keep doing for all of us who can't always keep up to date in all the changes. I know that feeling. I've been a long-time user of NVIDIA cards after some bad experiences with ATI. I'm looking at getting a new video card since my GTX 250 is barely handling Battlefield 3, Star Wars, The Old Republic, and EVE Online. I've heard they've made a lot of progress from the days I last used an ATI video card. I think they probably have. I'm more than open to what you recommend. I have a budget of below $200 with shipping and tax for Ohio. I'm looking to get the best performance for my gaming I can get while being able to handle games for a while longer. Would it be possible to run my old GTX 250 card as a physics card with the ATI video card? And my first thought, Zach, is physics really worth it? Did physics ever end up doing anything useful, Ryan? Because every time I think about physics, I think it just never really went anywhere.
Yeah, no. Unless you play Batman a lot, physics is pretty useless. Nobody.
What's Arkham Asylum doing
So Arkham City is a new one, and it adds sort of interesting effects to it. Like there's volumetric smoke and fog that appear in the game that when Batman or a character walks through them, it does displace interestingly, and it's cool. That is not there when physics is disabled. If you in his particular case, in Zach's case,
right.
Sure, you could leave that in there and enable physics, and I wouldn't feel bad about that because you're not investing any more money. But I would still not tell anybody to spend extra money to get physics. The first problem, though, is you still cannot enable physics on a GTX 250 or any NVIDIA card when your primary graphics card is an ATI or AMD Radeon graphics card, which is stupid. And it is completely a software marketing, political BS reason. There's no technical reason why it's not possible.
Tell us how you really feel, Ryan.
Yeah, no, it's something. These people need. Everybody needs to know the truth. It's if you talk to somebody from NVIDIA marketing, they'll tell you it's like, oh, we can't possibly qualify all the combinations of blah 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 blah. And it's all bull.
They qualify all their own combinations.
Yeah. Then enable it and say, hey, your mileage may vary. Boom, done. Then that's all you'd have to do. But they choose.
But basically, to bring it back to ATI versus NVIDIA, I would say GTX 560 is probably still around $250. What do you like at $200 for a GPU? Or let's call it 180. So there's money for tax and shipping in there, or at least shipping.
So we just AMD just released the 7770 series, which is like $159, and because of that, we tested the GTX 560, not the 560 Ti, but the base 560, as well as the 6850 and 6870. And those cards come in right around the $180 to $190 mark. And I think the 6870 or the GTX 560 would be your best option there, depending on which one you wanted to go with. GTX 560 uses a little bit more power. 6870 is more power efficient and will support 3 displays out of a single card. NVIDIA still doesn't offer that option. The 6870 is probably the best value for you right now per dollar. You could probably find that first closest to 160 or 165 if you're looking for one with a rebate, maybe 180, 190 without a rebate. So if I were, as I am, recommending somebody buy a card just under the $200 mark, it would probably be the Radeon HD 6870 today. But then you can't do physics. But as we've kind of discussed,
if you're not playing Arkham City, you probably can't take advantage of physics anyway.
I could never see myself making a graphics decision based on physics. I really couldn't.
Buy the 6870, download the ATI drivers. We suspect you'll have a delightful and happy experience with it, Zach. What's coming up on PC Per, man?
So we're moving still. We're unpacking. I don't think that's very exciting for everybody. But we do have a big roundup of ASUS video cards coming up. I think all 6800 and 6900 series graphics cards, some of the highly overclocked models. And then we have a review of the Alienware M14X gaming as well that will be published. Maybe this weekend, maybe Monday. So keep an eye out for that. Some pretty cool stuff. And then unpacking and organizing. Anybody wants to come by and help, let me know.
I would offer, but I'm kind of stuck at the wrong end of the country.
I've looked at flight prices recently, and I'm not interested in flying out here for this specific purpose.
I'm an awesome unpacker of boxes, though. You should have brought me out for the move, man. I am amazing carrying boxes upstairs.
It's amazing how much of a pain it turns out to move 110 meters. Like,
yeah,
it's like, wow, I could almost throw some of this stuff over there, but I probably shouldn't. And then it's from a second floor as well.
Because you still have to pack everything. It's just far enough that you have to pack everything into boxes to get it there safely.
Exactly. You still have to put it all in the back of a truck to literally turn left. You have to wait at a stoplight, turn left, drive 70 yards, and turn left again into the next parking lot. So anyway, what about on Techzilla? What do you guys got?
We've got something involving a new operating system that's coming out from a company you know and love that I can't talk about. And doing it in a Mahi home server build, which I think actually I'm getting a little excited about. Not Raspberry Pi excited, but just a step under Raspberry Pi excited. So that's keeping it real, man. Getting our hands dirty with the builds on Techzilla this week. Techzilla.com is the website for that one. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. We'd love to hear your questions. Basically, if it's about hardware, we will entertain them. If it's personal, we might entertain them. If it's about software, it better have a hardware tie-in. Like, what graphics card do I need for this video game? Do I need a Core i7 for my home media server? No. Use an older box. What does 90% plus mean when they apply it to a power supply? All that kind of good stuff. We love your questions. Send them into Twitch at twit.tv. You can find Ryan and I on the Twitter at Ryan Shrout and Patrick Norton. And, of course, Ryan's home away from home is PCPer.com, and my home away from home is Techzilla.com. And I think we're going to call it we'll save the Coke freestyle for next week.
Yeah, do that.
For anybody who was watching the show live last week that stuck around after we wrapped the computer hardware part, you heard a extensive Ryan Chad at the desk in Twit Central and myself obsessing over the technology inside the Coke Freestyle machine. And I'm going to let this go because we're going to see maybe by next week Ryan will have a Coke Freestyle machine in his office. Which just
awesome.
Makes me
it happens.
laugh.
It'd be awesome.
All right, everybody. That's it for this edition of Twitch. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week.
Oh, Patrick, I didn't show you this. I have IKEA LEDs.
Go crazy.
Oh,
Like the color changing ones.
it was so funny. I went into I had a couple of crazy 8 minutes before closing runs into IKEA, and I ran into our favorite former co-host and a friend of hers buying the entire stock of what they had left in those.
When was this?
This is a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
Could have been before Christmas, may have been after CES. That whole 6-week space is kind of a massive blur at this point. But giggled my ass off.
I want to buy these individually. They're modular and they just extend, but I want to buy these separately and cheaper.
Right.
By the way, have you seen them in her apartment?
No.
They're awesome. They're so cool. She has them running up this pillar, and so it lights the whole side of the wall, and it's behind the pillar, so it just looks like it's glowing.
And she can twist a dial and make it unique.
But it's always Android green.
Oh, my goodness. I think I can actually see her house from the highway when I'm driving home then.
You can, probably.
Oh, I'm going to laugh about that all night long. What should we call this? We want Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, it makes me hungry, but yeah, it's probably accurate.
How about 22 nanometers of fear? Dude, you are
The guy who's helping me design the set is watching, and I'm showing him these LEDs. Look, Joey. Look.
They glow in multiple colors.
They're just not cheap enough. Like, this is like the one of the few items at IKEA that I'm like, how is that not less expensive? This set of 4.
Dude, you're holding a miracle of technology and you're griping because it costs you.
It's $40 American dollars.
All of that?
For 4 of them? Ugh. $10 a foot.
Yeah, and it comes with the controller and the power supply, and all I really want is more of these and see how far I can extend
people
it.
in your